Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. We will be waiting a few more minutes to let everyone trickle in. The recording will be available and sent to your email in 24 hours. And as a special item of this webinar slash panel discussion, we'll be sending you the actual salary report in 24 hours that we're going to cover in the slides here today. So we will get them to you, but just have to wait till tomorrow. And we love questions, so please ask questions. We have Nikki Sundstrom joining us right now. Tim Baldwin will also be joining us in a few minutes here, and they can help answer any questions that you have or want this to really be interactive and engaging because I want to create the space for that. So definitely everyone butt in, ask questions. You can do that in the Q&A, like in the Zoom bar. You can ask questions directly or send messages in the chat as well. Yeah, Nikki, I was just wondering, like I was thinking, I was just practicing my slides before this, and
Yeah.
it there really aren't that many higher ed salary reports or surveys out there. I think Simpson Scarborough did one from
Yeah.
2022 during COVID, but haven't really
Right.
seen anything on a consistent basis. But I don't know if I'm missing one, but
No, I think they're a bit of a rarity. I know I've seen in some of the smaller social media communities that are kind of organic amongst the industry where they've created their own ad hoc reports.
Mhm.
Over my 2 decades in the industry, I've certainly had many one-on-one conversations with individuals curious about how to help justify an increase or promotion or staffing, obviously. So it's a hot topic.
Good to hear. All right. Give everyone another minute or two. And yeah, while we're waiting,
Hey,
why don't we
Kelly.
how about everyone engage with the chat here? Oh, and that
Yeah,
actually
definitely let
reminds
us know
me.
where you're from.
I think I can change a setting. So panelists, Nick, you should be able to now message the rest of
Wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. It's crazy. Zoom doesn't have that set out of the box.
I know. That's
Hi,
awesome.
Monica. Hi, Melanie. Carrie. Caroline, good to see you.
I know it's great. I see quite a few familiar names in here as well.
Yeah, and just a quick message. If there's a drop down for like who you're messaging. So if you want to speak with everyone, you can drop down to everyone. If you want to just speak with the host and the panelists, you can do that too. If you want to be a little more anonymous. Hey, Dave, good to see you. Cool. Just give it. Make sure I check my email one last time. I know Tim had a meeting back to back,
Yeah, sure. I see both
so we
private
can
and
go ahead and get started.
public reps in here. So that'll make the conversation even more interesting because we certainly have different
Yep.
financial structures.
All right. Well, I'll get things rolling for time's sake, and Tim will hopefully show up here in a minute.
Yeah.
Just a bit of a housekeeping item is if you see the Zoom bar, you can ask questions using the Q&A, or you can also just ask questions in the chat, but definitely stay engaged. And then, Nikki, do you want to do it just a quick self intro?
Sure, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Nikki Sundstrom. Currently serving as a strategic advisor at the University of Michigan, as well as a member of the faculty. Um, Trying my chops at teaching others the future of our industry on how to operate and navigate strategic social media. And then additionally have started my own consultancy. So I'm really happy to be here today.
It's thank you so much for joining as well. Nikki's been on the podcast and a few other online discussions and webinars, so she's been great help in educating everyone, particularly about social media marketing, higher ed. So thank you so much. And then Tim Baldwin's just again, oh, there, speak of the devil. Here we are, Tim.
I made it. Thanks for your
Yes, we
patience.
were actually just doing self intros, and guess whose turn it is?
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Baldwin. I am the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Brand Strategy at Towson University. I have been at this university for 7 years. I've had the pleasure of serving in a role where we help to manage the institutional brand and marketing efforts for enrollment and athletics, among other things. And it is great to be with you.
It's great having you as well, Tim. Thanks so much for joining with your tight tight schedule. I really appreciate it. Cool. Well, just a bit about the agenda here. We'll cover some mission statements, details of how we surveyed, and then we'll cover a little bit of like what I'm feeling and hearing about the state of higher ed marketing. I'd love to ask the audience that as well. Uh, just some quick TLDRs or quick key findings that I'll explain, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into the statistics and the reporting that we found, which will also cover work preferences and responsibilities and how that's changing. And then we'll have a Q&A at the very end, and we can move on here. So first off, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who participated in the survey. I think there's probably a bunch of you in this call today that were involved in the survey. So thank you so much for your input. Literally, like I only used organic outreach to get all the respondents for this. So it's been super, super helpful. So again, thank you so much. Just a quick thing about Concept 3D, who's sponsoring the salary survey and report this time around. We really help support marketing, admission, and student engagement teams, and our main solutions involve our interactive campus map, our events calendar with local list events, our virtual tour with 360 tours, and we also have a new solution to help a personalized admissions outreach called Flipped App as well. So I'm sure you'll hear more about all those things in the near future. Awesome. So the why, right? Why did I start the salary survey? Um, I think it was like maybe 2 years ago. I saw a post from Jamie Hunt about a salary job description for a social media marketing role, and I think it had over 1,000 or maybe 1,500 comments on there. And everyone, even outside of higher ed, was kind of, joining into the comment section saying, "Hey, this is ridiculous. Like, look at the responsibilities. This is four roles." The conversation was just endless. 1,000 comments is crazy for LinkedIn. I don't see that on hardly ever. And I said, this is something people really care about, right? So I wanted to first understand if people in higher ed are in fact being compensated less compared to other industries. I think that's the big elephant in the room I wanted to address. And I also, figured out that because people were engaging on the post, that this is something people really cared about. And quite frankly, it was hard to find information on salary reporting. And so I saw this as an opportunity to provide more value to the higher ed community that we serve, which is in particular higher ed marketing. So, yep, that's the big why on why we started the salary survey. And we hope to really shed more light on compensation trends. We want to help advocate for fair pay and ensure that higher ed marketers are being recognized for the hard work and increasing roles and responsibilities they're being asked to do. So, yeah, hopefully everything comes with great knowledge and is helpful for everyone on this call here today. Great. So, real brief, there's a lot going on in higher ed, especially in the last 10 days since inauguration, obviously. But I wanted to point, the state of higher ed in specific to questions we could help answer based on the survey reports. So here are kind of like the quick three TLDRs and key findings that I'm hearing. So number one is a lot of higher ed marketers are feeling overwhelmed for the increased expectation in roles and responsibilities. With the enrollment cliff here this year and next year, many colleges are increasingly looking at marketing to be responsible for reaching their different goals, right? Maybe that's branding, enrollment, reputation, crisis comms, all these things. They're really looking to marketing to fix those, not to mention spearheading AI communities as well, or AI task force. Definitely the feeling of undercompensation compared to other industries. In our own survey, 57% said that their pay was not competitive to other industries. A lot of people said maybe, so there's a lot of uncertainty there. but I think the big number here is that only 18% said yes. So there's a lot of uncertainty there in compensation compared to other industries. And then lastly, I think attracting and retaining top talent is very difficult. I think this conversation has slowed down a little bit since like 2021 to 2023 when it was a huge employee market. But I still think that it's a huge part of the conversation here. Um, and I don't think that just higher pay alone can solve a lot of these systemic issues because quite frankly, like not everyone just can just dish money out, right? So um, that's kind of what I'm feeling. And that takes us to our first poll question, which is I'm asking the audience, what else are higher ed marketers feeling or experiencing? Anything that you want to chime in with, Tim or Nikki, while we wait for everyone to uh, ask some questions here?
I think I recall that post that you referenced from Jamie Hunt from years ago. And unfortunately, I think I've seen even more of them recently. So it just kind of struck me that we might be still stuck in that same vicious cycle due to resource constraints. And I think still a lot of trends that just were an outcome of the pandemic within the marketing and communication spaces.
Yeah, for us, I think, we're probably in a situation that many higher ed marketers are, especially on the public side of things. Our state is looking at budget cuts and a pretty tight budget shortfall. And so the next several years doesn't necessarily offer a lot of, highlights in terms of what the financial outlook might be, particularly as enrollment becomes a little bit more challenging for us all. And we have to kind of work through other types of economic challenges. And so I think, that might be something that I think a lot of folks are feeling in terms of, you know, if the long-term outlook doesn't look necessarily that bright, how does, my individual kind of performance and my individual kind of outlook look within the higher education space? So I think, there's probably a lot of folks that are pretty concerned about that at the moment.
Along those same lines, Tim, I feel like, particularly at the end of the last quarter of 2024, we saw a lot of um, releases of staff or shrinkings of staffs, both within the higher education marketing environment, but certainly being here in the state of Michigan within agencies and the auto industry, which kind of adds to the anxiety, regardless of whether or not you're employed, but you're certainly keen to what's happening within the industry as a whole. And it really makes you reflect, I think, on what it is that you want for your professional career, or even what's available to you.
Yeah. For sure. And the idea of having to be a little bit more personally resilient and thinking through like, what is it that you want to get out of your career? What is it that, higher education is affording you? Should you want to stay in higher education? And how does that compare to what might be an opportunity outside of this industry is something I think a lot of people think about. There's some, and I know, Sherry, you're going to talk about some of the things that are pluses within the kind of space that we live in beyond just salary. But I think that, those are things that, become top of mind considerations for all of us, no matter what level you're at.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. We have a lot of really good questions that I think we can cover along the way if they're relevant to what we're talking about. Otherwise, we'll get to them at the Q&A at the very end. Awesome. So here just in short some of the key findings we found from all of our results. So big question here was, are higher ed marketers undercompensated? So we did some cross-industry benchmark analysis and found ranges for years of experience, and we found that early career compensation, so from new hire to about 5 years, is just about at average. But we definitely saw a ceiling that starts from the 6 to 9 years of experience, and then it kind of slows down or gets better again, and then slows down again at that 20 plus year mark. So this is actually very consistent with the results we saw from 2022's Simpson Scarborough report as well, especially with the ceiling between that 6 to 9 year experience space. And then employee retention and satisfaction. Salary is still the most important factor when it comes to staying at a job or leaving a job, but there's definitely a lot more opportunity for employers to focus more on work-life balance, benefits, and career growth to retrain and retain and attract their workforce. I was pretty surprised that salary wasn't mentioned every time. And so, yeah, it was new news to me. The role of the higher ed marketer has definitely escalated into wearing a lot more hats. We identified that on average, each person was responsible for 2.5 key functions under one title. And surprise, surprise, social media was the most mentioned key function among everyone. I think it was about a third of our respondents mentioned social media.
I'm
So
not surprised
yes,
by
def
that at all.
yeah, no, absolutely. And then unfortunately, there we still saw some gender pay disparities. Um, I think about 75% of our respondents were female or women, and it's a completely dominated role from a gender perspective in higher ed marketing. Men still seem to earn more in early career and senior roles as well. So definitely saw that as well. Just a quick look. I already explained a little bit about how we surveyed, but we had a total of 267 respondents, and at varying levels of experience in higher ed, as you can see, and a lot of different seniority levels. We definitely had a lot of senior level, actually, folks submit their surveys, which was great to see. And again, really, our outreach was almost purely organic. I used a lot of the communities and conferences that we attended to help get respondents. And then I also host a podcast and I got to ask everyone there. So thanks if you've been on the podcast. I see some of the guests in there today. In terms of institutions, so there was a nice spread. About 64% worked at a four-year university, 29% at private college, 5% at community college. And so it was good to see that. Would like to maybe even out that spread a little bit more next year as we do this for 2026. And I also found that it was pretty interesting. 50% or almost 50% of our respondents had their master's degree, which is pretty interesting. I think I did research for higher ed marketers, or sorry, marketing in general, and it's between 5 to 10% have their master's degree outside of higher ed. So a lot more higher ed marketers have higher levels of education as well. So moving on to this slide here, this is just a pure average of all the titles. So definitely don't use this to base your own salary and where you fit in. But yes, this is just the median salary was 72,000 and average salary was around 85,000. A better scale of this is looking at your years of experience and seeing where you fit in the medium and average here that you can look at yourselves. But again, we had a pretty good number of respondents in each. I'd say that the only one we were lacking in is in 20 plus years. We had a little less respondents, so it makes the data a little less accurate. But I feel confident about the other segments as well.
There's a question in the chat real quick related to the credentials and the degrees and whether or not they
Yep.
were marketing specific. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Oh, let's see. For this slide here, the
Yes,
credentials.
it looks like
Let's see.
Noah asked about that.
Oh, no, I did not ask to follow up on that. I just asked if they what was their highest level of education they've completed. So yeah, I assume it was related to marketing, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's a good point. I'm making iterations. I'm gonna write that question down as a iteration for next year. Awesome. Let me just check my Q&A section. Okay. This is the breakdown by gender. So in the key findings, we did talk about how early in the career, early careers and senior careers after 20 years, there seems to be the biggest gap. From 6 to 9 years, at least based on our data, where was it? I think that was when things got the most even. So um, I think the numbers here are not updated. I'm sorry about that. We'll fix that before the next before we send this out tomorrow. But yeah, I think 6 to 9 years was when women and men actually made comparatively the same, and then the earliest gaps were early career and senior titles. I think there's a conversation here as well. So we did find I did ask questions around whether you worked in the central marketing team or school of or college of or graduate school. And I found that at least on average, central marketing folks did make a little bit more, so 91,000 compared to the 81,000 for school or college of. And then it was interesting to see the differences by school size too, by salary. It seemed like the 10 to 20K mark we had was the highest salaries, and then it definitely spiked again at 30K. But then the 20 to 30K school size, this is by students, seemed to drop again. So I don't know if you have any comments on this, Nikki or Tim, but um, yeah, I would think
I mean, I think that
I didn't see a correlation. Go
I
ahead.
think it's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely something that I would be curious about from a data point standpoint. There's a lot of universities that would be in the medium to large size that would fall into that 10,000 to 20,000 type of institution. And my suspicion is you're also going to see a pretty good mix there of public institutions as well. And so, yeah, curious. Our university, as an example, we're just at 19,400 or so, and so we're right in that sweet spot of 10 to 20K, and it would be curious to kind of see how that breaks out and maybe what might be behind some of that.
And these are averages as well, right?
Correct. Yes. Not
So
median.
I wonder what would I would say off the top of my head is I wonder if at some of these larger institutions, the top sort of salary levels or are fewer, and you have more junior level marketers, and so that's bringing down that average a little bit. So it could just be a structural reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking as well, Nikki. I think
Mhm.
I maybe had more people respond in those junior titles at that 20 to 30K mark, and that's what maybe skewed some of the data. Cool. And it is interesting to see that the under 2K school size salary actually spiked up. And I think it's because those folks have a team of 1 to 3, and a lot of senior titles responded to that. But I mean, their work responsibilities are extremely inflated. They have, 5 to 6 key functions that they are owning. So it's a definitely tough job.
I think it's also harder to get lost or looked over in a smaller environment, right? You
Hmm.
tend to be more transparent with your colleagues and your coworkers, and the equity thing really comes up. Where in some of the larger institutions, if you're really siloed between schools, colleges, and central administration, and you're not a public institution, so your salaries aren't, available online, like becomes challenging to be an advocate of one or even to know what you should be aspiring to.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I can move on here. And Kelly, I see your question about viewing the salary average by job title. Yeah, we can cover that. I wasn't sure if we had the time to go through all of the slides from the entire presentation, but I think we're on track, so let's try and get there. All right, so one of the key findings that I first explained was, are higher ed marketers undercompensated? So here's a really good visual of what we found were average salaries for different years of experience. So on the right-hand graph, you can see the the greenish, whatever color might come into you, greenish gray is the range, so from low to high, and the black line graph is what marks our our results from this survey. So to the 1 to 2 year mark, we were at or slightly above average of what we found higher ed marketers are making. Sorry, higher ed in general are making. And then I think that 6 to 9 year mark is where you start seeing that discrepancy, because you see that the black bar graph is at the low point of the averages. And then again, you see it at the 20+ year mark. So I thought that was really interesting. Um, One takeaway I had was that I think, and maybe because I work in technology myself, like I think often the comparison you make is like your friend that works in technology or IT. But we do forget, like, marketers, there's marketers in every industry. And that includes like uh, nonprofits, right? Maybe there's a lot of marketing titles in nonprofits that I think typically pay pretty low. And so um, it was pretty interesting to see, especially that 1 to 5 year mark. But I don't know if there's any other comments from Nikki or Tim or the audience here today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the interesting thing, sometimes when we talk to folks, and particularly for those folks that are coming into higher education for the first time, and they're coming from industry, and they're used to being compensated maybe a little bit higher than they might be offered a position within higher education. There's usually a question back and forth around, well, I'm earning this in my current role, or I'm earning this in the private sector. Why is it not the same? And some of what we try to help folks understand is within higher education, at least within our institution as an example, there's quite a lot of fringe that comes with a salary as well. So, you mentioned the instances of degrees that happen, for folks that work within higher education, the kind of skewing of that. A lot of folks within our office, I can think of 5 people already that are currently in a program and they're getting additional value to their career. And some of them are finding that value in terms of being able to work in this environment, have a fairly competitive salary, but then also be able to kind of have a degree that's, paid for or fully paid for. And so sometimes, having those discussions with candidates is really important, and trying to kind of like talk about the full compensation that exists within an environment versus just the salary. Healthcare is another great example of that. That's a pretty significant cost for a lot of folks with their careers. And, most folks are getting it through a private employer of some kind. And those can be very competitive in some higher education spaces, some not so much. It depends on the school, depends on whether it's public or private, small or large, what kind of arrangements they have. But sometimes looking at that in your full compensation can help to kind of really determine, well, wait a minute, if I go to the private sector, am I going to get more out of this? Potentially, yes. Could depend on the field, depend on what kind of marketing role it is and where you are in your career. But those kinds of things are things that we often have to talk through with folks, and we consider ourselves in terms of, moves that folks make into the industry and moves that folks make out.
Yeah, I certainly have to agree with Tim when you reference the data point about degrees. Um, Instantaneously, I knew it was most likely because of the added benefit that many higher education institutions offer, which is, advanced degrees or discounted programming or credentialing, which is fascinating because yes, it's an added benefit, but typically what we are seeing in this salary reflection though is that when achieving those higher degrees, we can't reward it with financial compensation, right? So it's a potential to actually lose a lot of individuals. So they may take a job in higher education to get the discounted degree and then depart, which tends to cause a retention issue.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks, especially folks who have maybe 3 to 5 years of experience in the working world,
Mhm.
coming into higher education, seeing that benefit, understanding that maybe a master's degree, is kind of a right fit for them, and they take advantage of that. We have them for 3, sometimes maybe 4 years. And then you're right, the first question you get when you get a degree, your family might ask you, like, well, so does that increase like what you're going to be earning? And you're right, Nikki. Absolutely. That doesn't necessarily equate, unfortunately, depending on the type of position that it is. And so, yeah, I think we definitely have some retention challenges that we experience with that, and trying to figure out how to, I think for most folks, there's always going to be a timeline that a job is going to be a good fit for you. And certainly our goal is not to keep folks here longer than they need to be, but at the same time, we want to make it the most attractive place as possible for folks to be able to engage and to find value in their careers. And so sometimes those are conversations that we have too.
Yeah, Tim, I've got a really good story that hopefully no one relates to, but it's very applicable for this example because it's what landed me in sort of higher ed. When I finished my graduate degree and was working in government at the time, I went to advocate for myself and say just that thing. I have this new degree. Um, how can you compensate me? And they typed it into their calculator in their algorithm and they said, we'll give you an extra 88 cents. I said, that is not going to pay my student loan. I need to start looking for other roles. And luckily, the University of Michigan called me back.
Nice.
Wow, that's crazy. That's almost like worse to hear that back, Don't even say that.
Very true. Very true.
All right, and I think it was Kelly, like, yeah, who asked about. Anyways, I pulled up the slide back into this presentation. So we have a quick salary summary. This is at by average for different titles and what they're getting paid on average. Yeah. And it was interesting to see. I wasn't sure if I wanted to even ask this question because marketing roles, even outside of higher ed, typically don't see a lot of bonuses unless it's a leadership role. But I was kind of surprised to see that 10% did get a bonus. So that was something new I learned as someone who hasn't worked directly in higher ed. And it'll be interesting to track that number over time because if the goals are increasing and responsibilities are increasing and you're able to fulfill them, I'd assume the bonus structure will change too in the future.
Yeah,
I'd
and
like it to change at least.
the bonus language is interesting too in higher ed, and I'd love to hear both from Tim and then also those in the chat because what I'm familiar with is cost of living, right? Increases outside of salary increases, and then also when there is a fiscal surplus or the ability to reward employees, you sort of get like a one-time, not even a bonus, but like an additional payment for the year because there was a pocket of money that remained. So it's not anything that you can guarantee, and it's not really performance of the industry based like some agencies or automotive would be.
Yeah, bonuses I think are
Absolutely.
I think are pretty rare in our space in higher education. I mean, I think that depending on the institution, whether there's an incentivized bonus for someone on the marketing side that might be tied to enrollment goals or those types of financial, metrics that the institution might be looking at is possible, or a more senior position where potentially, there's some added value with certain, objectives being met. I think they're pretty rare. We too have cost of living increases, but they are inconsistent. Some states they have certain kind of like standard kinds of time that employees might have cost of living increases. In our state, it can vary, and it will depend on whether the budget is looking good or not so good, and how the governor might feel about giving state employees a bonus on the public side. And so that's a hard thing to have conversations with about with teams, is this idea that you can't always rely on those types of things. Sometimes they come unexpectedly, and sometimes we've had situations where there have been more than one of those types of increases in a year, and we've had years where there have been none. And so I think that too, if the industry was able to be a little bit more consistent, I think folks would kind of see that as an opportunity. I think the other thing that's really curious, and I'd be kind of interested to hear from folks in the chat about, is merit-based kinds of increases as well. Certain institutions, build those into compensation in terms of your performance. Others don't, or maybe are inconsistent with that as well. And so I think those are things that people are always looking for in terms of performance. How do I stay vested in my role? What's the incentive for me to kind of, go that extra mile? And maybe for some folks, that's a merit opportunity, and for others, it may not be. And so I think looking for those kinds of things, and whether your institution has that or not, can play into, how long you want to stay invested, and what opportunities there are in terms of your compensation long term.
Awesome. Thank you for your input there. Cool. I wanted to move a little bit more into the section about responsibilities and preferences for work as well. And so I have a question around work preference for location. So do you want to work full-time in office, hybrid, or fully remote? And I know there's nuances for hybrid, like how many days in the office. We're not going to cover that here. But if you had to pick one of these.
I will say this, I don't know about you, Nikki, but in our space, as someone who does some hiring, oftentimes the conversations we're having with candidates are really more focused on this question than they are even focused sometimes on salary. Folks are really looking for, what does hybrid mean? What kinds of flexibility will I have in this particular role? If I am going to be in the office, will I have a private space? Those kinds of things are very top of mind. And, pre-pandemic, we were not really having conversations at all with candidates about those types of things. And I think the onus on us as an industry to figure out how to provide, the most flexibility is that added value for a lot of people. And for some candidates, it seems to be a top of mind, if not more important thing sometimes than salary.
Yeah, I certainly think, and I assume we'll get to this later as well, but the salary transparency in job descriptions, I think is fundamental to ensuring that we are being respectful of potential candidates. Nothing really, I think, feels like a larger waste of your time than going through a process, creating an application that's specific to a role, and then getting to that phone call and finding out that it's half of what you're currently making, or it doesn't offer job flexibility. So I would agree, those for me are the two, I think, first things that you hear. And I think that our industry would, it'd be a really good service that we could do for ourselves to just upfront explain what those options are, in order to ensure that candidates know and go in with eyes wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fortunate to live in the state of Colorado where salary transparency is a requirement in a job description. I know there's a few other states out there. There's probably about 10 of them, but yeah, it's very tough when you don't see that and it's a guessing game. So completely agree with you, Nikki. I did share the results for work preference. So 12% said in office full time. Hybrid was obviously the clear winner here at 78%, and then fully remote at 10%. All right. So we'll get back to the work preference comment here, but I did ask a question in the salary survey about what is the most important factor when you're either considering a new job or leaving a job. So as mentioned, salary was the most important one, but with 267 respondents, 157 said yes to that one or mentioned it is the most important factor,
Mhm.
which is about a little less than two-thirds of it, which I was expecting to be higher. And so, as you can see, work-life balance came in at a close second. I would say close in respect of like what's being mentioned, salary, work-life balance, right? At 123, benefits at 96, and career growth at 88. And so, I mean, one key takeaway I see for the managers and directors out there, what are things you can do in the work-life balance uh, area, right? That may not actually come at an additional cost to the institution that you can offer your team to help retain or attract new employees. Same question goes to career growth as well and benefits, probably at a little bit more of a cost, but how can you improve those three areas? But yeah, I'll open up for discussion here too.
All right, fine, I'll go, Tim. It's okay. I can't stand an awkward silence. Um, so I was giving this one a lot of thought. I was shocked actually too that salary was so like low, or the response wasn't as high, or everyone. But some of us, when we set our first our professional goals, it was always, based on money. And then as you mature in the industry, I think some of those other things start to emerge for you. Or maybe if you're starting a family, you're like, I'd rather take work-life balance, or not
Mhm.
knowing what their family situations or dynamics are, if they have a spouse or partner that's, allowing them to remain in a role while they maybe are a higher earner. There's just so many pieces of this puzzle. But thinking of my own career journey and things that I truly valued, where were work environments in which I felt my expertise was valued. I mean, that's enough to keep you around, right? That you feel like you're a part of the bigger picture, that you're contributing positively.
Hmm.
In environments that I've left, it was because there was very little respect for work-life balance. It was, creeping into evenings when it didn't need to, or you could just sort of tell that um, something that could have waited and wasn't really urgent, you still got the phone call, and you just start to look at how that impacts you overall. And so for those individuals that are in an environment where it doesn't cause them more stress than it should, I think they probably stay, and good for them. I mean, those are really rare opportunities to find, particularly in higher ed, in this society, in this environment, in marketing and communications, which are, two of the most demanding areas within our institutions. And that's all we really want to do in life is show up for a role that we feel valued and then be able to go home and live the rest of our lives and do so both with balance and seamlessness.
Yeah,
At
and I'll
least
say
that's my 2 cents.
yeah, for me, like one of the things that is not on this list that's really important for me is and it's kind of tied closely to what you mentioned, Nikki, in terms of work-life balance is leadership. The working for the right people, working on the right team, having a culture that really does respect you and your contributions and your expertise is really valuable. That has kept me at some of my roles longer, probably than I would have been willing to otherwise. It has also, conversely, when I haven't had that, forced me out the door a little bit faster than I probably would have wanted at some positions. So I think, sometimes make or break situations for me have been environments where I feel as though the leader or leadership really does believe in the team. I'd also be really curious about this data as it breaks out around the generations of folks in the workplace, and whether there are disparities between those who might be more early in their career, maybe Generation Z, kind of teams and employees, and millennial, kind of workers, as opposed to some of the other kind of generations. I suspect, although I don't know, I think my gut would be that younger generations of employees, from what I've experienced, really do value this idea of work not being everything. Work is important. Work obviously is a tool to facilitate a great quality life. But it's not necessarily for some, as critical in terms of their identities and what they want to do with their lives. And so I do have some curiosity about that, but I suspect that some of that kind of might be fueled by folks who, really do just generationally have a different view of what, working in an office or a university or any other type of environment might be.
Yeah, speaking specifically of generations, this is such a fascinating topic, having employed many interns and junior level staffers in the last few decades. One of the compensation pieces I know that we wanted to talk about today that is not financial, um, sort of solidifying as a leader in my mind that I really probably only have them for 3 to 5 years because they are a junior level employee and there's usually not professional growth opportunities within the same unit in a higher education environment. So you kind of have to help them grow, flourish, and then depart, which is a weird sort of maturation. But giving them as many different experiences as possible. And higher education environments are really phenomenal for this because we have immense academic expertise on some campuses. We have celebrity and high performing athletics programs or coaches. We have these executive leaders or presidents. And when you are operating within a space, particularly Marcom, where you might have the opportunity to interact with or create content or create campaigns in all of these spaces, I just look at it from a portfolio building standpoint. And that's kind of the appeal of some of these roles is you're not going to become a millionaire, but we're going to build this terrific experience that will essentially set you up to get your next job anywhere you'd like.
Yeah, man, these are such great comments. Yeah, I do think the variety of responsibilities, the opportunity, the plus side of that is that you get a lot of experience in different areas, and you get to get that experience in what I would argue as an enterprise setting. Like it's schools are massive, right? Like even if you work with 1,000 students, that's still a really big company. So you get a taste of doing a lot of different things for a very big company. And um, as someone who's worn a lot of hats in my career as a marketer as well, like I value that a lot. And so that's a great point. Um, so yeah, I'll definitely add the factor or break out the factor for next year's report around feeling valued at work or meaningful contribution, because I think that's very a key element as well. Thank you. All right, let's see here. And now we'll get to the work preference slide here. So we asked the same question on our salary survey. So I was curious to see how our current audience today compares to that. So in our survey, we found that 8% were currently being able to work remote at full capacity, 57 were hybrid, and 25% were in office. What people wanted to be at was at 20% fully remote, 72% hybrid, and 8% in office. So pretty close. I'd say the fully remote need or want on the survey was a bit higher than today's audience on this virtual event. But yeah, my big takeaway here is that I think even just over the last couple of years working in higher ed, I've noticed that a lot more folks are able to work hybrid. Maybe the marketing office is now being downsized so that other offices and staff can take over that space. But I'd still see a gap, right? There's about a 10% gap for fully remote and hybrid. And so that's like another very quick, easy work-life balance win that employers can offer their employees. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, but it's good because I think there has been a shift. No surprise here. I feel like, yeah, we can move on. But yeah, give more opportunities for work-life balance, higher ed marketing. All right. And then yeah, we kind of already covered this, right? So just going into what the important factors were for the survey respondents. So a little less than 2/3 marked salary, which was again lower than I had expected. Personally, I think Nikki said the same thing. So I think just really being able to offer more in work-life balance, benefits, and career growth is really going to be helpful for higher ed to retain and attract new employees. Because I think, as Nikki mentioned, there are a lot of upsides to that 1 to 5 year mark where students can graduate into other industries or other roles. Cool. All right. Well, we have a lot of questions here, and we have a few minutes left here, but I kind of wanted to ask Tim and anyone else who also wants to, Tim and Nikki, and anyone else who wants to raise their hand, I can put you on the mic as well. But I think one question I heard a lot, or one feeling, was just around burnout and how to prevent burnout and overwork. So do you have any comments on how you suggested your teams on doing that? Nikki?
Yeah.
Or
Nikki,
Tim?
you wanna go?
Well, I'm not the poster child anymore for this question. I'm the one that walked away from the industry last spring and then found my way back into it. So, I think that having the conversation and being more transparent about it is incredibly important. I think acknowledging that it's very real, even if individuals are not talking about it. And then to the point where we all just agreed that valuing your staff and feeling valued as a staff member is one of, if not the most important part of our work, right? And so if we can make sure that we are focusing on well-being in a manner that is productive in alignment with productivity, and then drawing more clear boundaries, right? Like that's one of the things that I saw where I was going next after my recent journey was how can I put stronger guidelines and boundaries in place for how I want to lead and how I want to participate within an organization. And that's something, as I mentioned earlier, would have never been a goal for me when I was in my early 20s and 30s. It was like, how can I reach $100,000? How can I reach $200,000? And then you get to those marks and you go, wow, did I really want this? And why did I want it? And how can I maintain this and also find success and satisfaction in the rest of my life? So, preventing burnout, I think you just got to take a step back and really deeply reflect on your priorities, and watch out for those around you and open up those dialogues and have those conversations. Don't pretend like it's not a thing, which I know a lot of us did in the beginning. We're like, burnout, that's a headline, doesn't really exist. And then too many of us experienced it during the course of the pandemic. And now we all are very hypersensitive and aware that it's very, very real, and something that we need to address.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add the boundary conversation was one we actually had as a team. So I lead a team of 8 people who are focused on marketing and brand. And we realized that boundaries were really tough for us. We had a hard time saying no to internal requests. And sometimes there's pressure from leadership to be a unit that's, a service-oriented unit as a marketing and communications unit, especially in a central office. What we decided to do was we sat down together and we created boundaries that were shared boundaries, right? So the idea is that, sometimes you have to do that for yourself. You have to say, hey, for me, this is going to be a particular thing that I'm not going to be able to do in this particular way, and I really want to hold this for myself. But I think to the extent that you have a team or a unit or partners or colleagues that you can build shared boundaries with, and by that I mean you create a boundary that you all hold together, I think that can be pretty impactful in our space, especially as the demands of our jobs, the demands of not just higher education jobs, but all jobs are going to continue to increase. I think that's something that's just a reality that we all have to face. And rather than seeing it as an uphill battle where we're going to have increasing challenges, just realizing that it's part of the push and pull of what an organization wants out of you. They're going to try to get the most work out of you. You're going to try to kind of keep yourself as sane as possible. Like those are always going to be competing, kind of things. And I think, that's part of it, is building that shared boundaries. I'll also say we work on college campuses. These are beautiful places in most cases. Get outside, take 15 minutes and walk outside. You'd be surprised at, and this time of year in some of our regions of the country, that's not really as
Very
possible.
cold here, Tim. Very cold.
But I think to the extent that you can do that, and you can do that with people that you have like-minded kind of connections with, that could be a colleague in your office, or it could be a colleague in another office. I think those are ways to kind of build relations with people and give yourself a chance to step back, maybe vent about some things that might be really challenging for you, and really develop community where you don't feel so alone. And then the last thing I'll say is, we don't talk about this a lot in our office yet, and I think we're just on the precipice of it, but maybe some of you in the chat might have already done this. And that's to talk about how tools that are available, like AI and others, can make our jobs better. What is it that you're kind of stressing about and that you're doing that's really difficult that might have an alternative solution that you haven't really considered? And I think those are things that we, maybe could, as an industry and as a group, kind of continue to think about in terms of making that work-life balance a little bit better, reducing the level of burnout that we all feel, because the demands are going to be there no matter what. There's always a need to kind of do more with less in whatever field you're in. So I think those are all helpful.
Yeah, I want to second Tim's sentiment about community and finding individuals that you can have candid conversations with. It also really speaks to informing yourself more broadly about what others in your industry or similar salary, title, or bracket might be encountering, right? That's how you find out, oh, so and so in this department, they make $30,000 more than we do over here. And if you don't ask those questions or meet those people, you're siloing yourself and sort of limiting what you can, which leads into my second point that I think is incredibly important. And that chart is just terrifying, where in that 6 to 9 year gap, the salary of the male gender sort of spikes. And I think, for me, speaking only for myself and those that I have had the experience to interact with, I think particularly with females, it's because many of us have not yet learned to advocate for ourselves. And at that point in our career, we still feel like if we work hard enough, we will naturally be recognized. And I can tell you 20 years into my career, that is not true. So start screaming and shouting from the rooftops the excellence that you bring to your roles and the value that you contribute, and how without what you're doing on a daily basis and the strategy you're applying, your institutions or organizations would not be able to accomplish what they do. Align all of your activities and your projects and your outcomes with the goals and objectives to your institution so that you can directly correlate that value and ask every time what, whether it's a different title or that cost of living or a little bit more, just ask the question. The worst that they can say is no, but they'll certainly know that it's top of mind for you, which I think goes a long way towards the vision that you have of excellence for yourself, and that you do have aspirations beyond just work-life balance or being within a community where everyone gets along. Not that those are not valuable, but demonstrating that. Don't be shy.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of questions kind of related that you both just answered around unclear goal setting, not understanding the values of what the work we're doing today. And I think a lot of that can be answered with what you just said, Nikki and Tim, is speaking up and asking your managers, your leadership, the why and what, and let them know about your uncertainty, because I do think the team dynamic in higher ed is strong. And especially from all the conversations I've had with the podcast. And so like you should be working on a team that supports the culture, that is able to ask questions and answer questions around those things. So yeah, definitely speak up if you're not already. Awesome. And real quick, I do have a closing slide here from Concept 3D, our sponsor here today. We do have accessible digital first solutions that drive a lot of higher ed engagement, particularly with the new DOJ rulings. I know we didn't talk a lot about accessibility. I think one of the comments in the questions was website management feels unmanageable. Totally understand if digital accessibility is a concern for you in this year or next year. Definitely consider our digital interactive maps because they are the most accessible solution on the market today. I do have a quick question to see if anyone is interested in any of our solutions. Please let us know. We'd love to speak with you as well. For some reason, my slide is not moving. All right. Well, it was so great to have you both and joining our discussion. We went a few minutes over, but it was amazing. I thought this was going to be a good one, and it was even better than I was expecting. So thank you so much. And thanks everyone for contributing and asking questions and staying engaged as well.
Yeah, really great to have the conversation. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation.
Fantastic. Yes. And to everyone, we're going to get you the report, the full report to your email inbox tomorrow at this time. So thank you again. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day.